Once there was a man named George Lucas. He was a storyteller who wanted to tell grand stories about aliens, laser swords, and space. That is until criticism became a little too much for him, and he sold the rights to his franchise to the Walt Disney Company and put a woman named Kathleen Kennedy in charge.
There's things that that I want to preserve within the spirit of this company, and as it moves into Disney, I think it's vitally important to anything we create that we hold on to the spirit of what started all of this.
And of course, she lied, and Star Wars became a franchise more focused on diversity than it was good writing, imagination, and characters. That became very apparent, especially after the release of The Last Jedi, but this gave rise to a group of YouTubers known only as the Fandom Menace. They each tried their best to guide Star Wars back to the place it needed to go. And after 2 successful seasons of The Mandalorian, it looks like they would all get their wish. That only lasted for about a month or so. After Gina Carano was publicly fired and shamed out of the role of Cara Dune, the Fandom Menace, this once big alliance of YouTubers who wanted to save Star Wars, well, they kind of just became anti-Hollywood after that. As for me, I just became anti-Disney, because I recognized most of the awful crap was just coming out of that company, and what do you know, I feel very vindicated in the year 2023, seeing like how they're kind of almost being taken over now by this Nelson Peltz guy. Whether or not that actually happens, who knows? I mean, it could potentially, but I'm otherwise invested in other things. I think the Monsterverse is great, and I love supporting that franchise. But when I heard Zack Snyder was making a Star Wars-like movie for Netflix, I was immediately interested, since I've always been a big fan of Snyder films since 300. Granted, I did not like Army of the Dead. I've been talking about Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon for quite a while. And last night, I actually got to see an early screening of it in New York City, and I had a great time. Unfortunately, it would seem that the mainstream critics who got to see it early didn't enjoy themselves, and now people that don't like Zack Snyder are using the mainstream critics to bludgeon that the movie is bad despite not seeing it, and for normally criticizing those said critics for bias in the past. So today, for my review, I'm going to go over the structure of the movie and I guess like try and pinpoint where the next movie is going to go. You guys can make up for yourselves whether or not you want to see it or not, but I'll give my opinions on the movie and lay out how it's structured. This is my breakdown of Rebel Moon Part 1, The Child of Fire. Child of Fire, like most stories, is broken up into 3 acts. A beginning, middle, and an end. What makes Rebel Moon Part 1 a little bit strange is that the second act is definitely the longest, wherein the third act is very short and comes rather abruptly. The first act, though, is like the first act in most movies. The movie opens with Anthony Hopkins' character, JC-1435, giving a brief history on the Mother World. We learn that the planet's monarchs were slain and its royal lineage completely severed. The goals of the Mother World are to conquer and subjugate any and all planets it can, by whatever means necessary. Our lead character, Kura, was apparently part of their military until a ship crash where she became the part of a village reminiscent of Nordic Viking culture. Of course, she's very uncomfortable with talking about her past, and blames that on why she isn't taking part in the village's fertility mating ritual for a good harvest. The Motherworld army eventually does show up on their doorstep, looking for insurgents. This, of course, makes the village very nervous, and Cora tells the village leader not to trust them, and to not offer any form of partnership. The village leader tries as best he can to negotiate a deal, while their leader Noble puts on a fake front of friendship and non-hostility. He eventually shows his true colors and beats the village leader to death with a stick. He demands a surplus of crops they cannot provide, and leaves a garrison of troops there. Cora decides to flee, not because she doesn't care about her newfound family, but because she knows they're all already doomed, and that a resistance is useless. That is, until the garrison tried to sexually assault one of her friends. One Zack Snyder action sequence later, the garrison is all dead. No, she didn't kill all of them by herself, but she did take out most of them. But regardless, the fact is the garrison is dead, and now she knows the community is in trouble and that she needs to mount a resistance. So she and her friend Gunnar go out in search of rebels who might be able to help them mount a defense against the Motherworld. And basically all of Act 2 from there on is just them finding and recruiting these rebels, particularly the Blood Axe siblings who they want to recruit the most. These rebels include the rogue Kai, the slave Tarak, the swordswoman Nemesis, an ex-Motherworld general, then finally Ray Fisher as Darian Bloodaxe. I think one of people's biggest complaints is that, we spend most of the time trying to recruit these characters, and we do get some introductions, and they each get, a sequencer. But we still don't know these characters very, very well. It's the same problem Rogue One had, except in that case, everyone died at the end, where we're at least getting one more movie and possibly a third one. There is a battle at the third act as one of these characters is a sellout, and the ensuing fight is pretty much the third act, and it's very quick. When the battle does end, the surviving rebels go to Cora's village, believing that their victory may have won them the war, or at the very least bought them time. And of course, they'd be wrong. It's by no means a masterpiece, and it being part one of a larger story means we're not going to get all the details right away. I'm going to get into that in a little bit more. But what it did give me, I felt, was leagues better than anything Disney has put out since, I guess, The Mandalorian. It has certain elements that are reminiscent of classic George Lucas Star Wars episodes 1 through 6, while also feeling a lot grittier than Star Wars ever did. Like when one of the male aliens at the bar scene grabbed Gunnar by the balls and tried to have sex with him. That scene would feel very out of place, even in Disney Star Wars. There are always going to be fans that will like whatever Zack Snyder puts out. I'm not one of them. I did not like Army of the Dead. I definitely like this a lot better than Army of the Dead. But my point is, there are going to be fans that will just like everything he does. And then there are going to be people who hate everything he does, regardless of how good it is. And for some people, this might not be their cup of tea. They might prefer old classic, like Star Wars, that didn't need like a gritty coat of paint to be cool. But for me, as someone who is starved for science space fantasy, I'm taking it. And I can't wait to see where it all goes next. I missed some important pieces of dialogue because of an audio issue at the theater, but I did pick up there was a princess who was apparently assassinated when the king died, part of the royal bloodline, and apparently she's had some messianic powers to bring back the dead. I believe all that's going to be very important in the next movie. I also think the bad guys are going to come back full force with a vengeance, and we should get more character development for some of the other characters. And I want to say that the character of Korra is definitely better than Rey. She's had training, her training is explained via the plot, and she shows more array of emotions and challenges as she tries to overcome basically the brainwashing she was put through since childhood. Now, I also recognize some people are kind of in woke shell shock right now and are kind of suspicious when it comes to female lead characters in action roles. There's also the South Park meme that from the Panderverse about putting chicks in it and making her gay. Well, I can assure you that Korra isn't gay. She at least likes guys. But for those that's still on the fence that she's going to be a woke feminist Mary Sue, I say just give her a chance. Like, you know, so far I like where it's going. So if you have Netflix, I definitely recommend checking it out when it drops. Thank you all for watching this review. Please remember to like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all next time. Dash Attack out.